the smell of coffee and bacon. Grease had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat. Every evening at 6:47 p.m., exactly 13 minutes before the dinner rush, a small boy would press his face against the glass window of Martha's diner, his breath creating foggy circles that he'd wipe away with the sleeve of his too-thin jacket. His name was Tommy Chen, and he was 9 years old, though hunger had a way of making him look younger, all sharp angles and hollow cheeks that no child should possess. Martha Brennan had noticed him 3 weeks earlier. She was 62, with hands weathered from 4 decades of flipping burgers and pouring coffee, and eyes that missed nothing. The first time she saw Tommy, she'd walked outside with a to-go container, but he'd already disappeared into the Philadelphia twilight like smoke. The second time, she was faster. She caught him 2 blocks down, his small frame practically swimming in a coat that must have been donated from someone 3 sizes larger. "You hungry, baby?" she'd asked, and the way his eyes had widened, part fear, part desperate hope, had cracked something open in her chest. That was how it started. Every evening, Tommy would appear at closing time. Martha never made a big deal of it. She'd simply set a plate at the corner booth, meatloaf on Mondays, chicken pot pie on Wednesdays. Whatever the special was that day, he'd eat slowly, savoring every bite, and then he'd help her wipe down tables without being asked. He never spoke much about where he came from, but Martha had pieced it together. His mother worked 3 jobs. His father wasn't in the picture. The small apartment they shared in the rundown section of Kensington barely qualified as shelter. The other regulars at the diner had noticed Tommy, too. Old Mr. Peterson, who came in every morning for black coffee and wheat toast, started leaving extra tips with a note for the boys' dinner. Sarah, the nurse who worked night shifts at Temple University Hospital, began ordering extra sides she'd accidentally forgotten to eat. Even Jorge, the dishwasher who sent most of his paycheck back to his family in Guatemala, would slip Tommy a homemade tamale wrapped in foil. But Martha was Tommy's guardian angel. She never pitied him. Pity had a taste to it, bitter and humiliating. Instead, she treated him like family. She'd quiz him on his homework while he ate. She'd celebrate when he showed her a B+ on his math test. She'd listen when he talked about his dreams of becoming an architect, of designing buildings that would touch the sky. "You're gonna do it too," she'd tell him, her voice full of certainty. "I can see it in you, baby. You've got something special." 3 months into this routine, on a bitterly cold February evening, everything changed. The man who walked into Martha's diner at 7:15 p.m. didn't look like he belonged there. His coat probably cost more than Martha's monthly rent. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from never having to worry about where your next meal would come from. The dinner rush was in full swing, and every booth was packed except for one, Tommy's corner spot, which Martha always kept free until he arrived. The man, whose name was Jonathan Price, hesitated at the entrance. He'd been driving through Philadelphia when his Tesla's battery had died 2 blocks away. He'd left his charging cable at his office, and his phone was at 8%. He needed to wait somewhere warm while the mobile service arrived, and this diner had been the closest option. He slid into the empty corner booth, trying not to think about the cracked vinyl or the slightly sticky table. Martha approached with a menu and a smile that had welcomed 10,000 strangers. "Coffee, hon? Please, black." Jonathan glanced around the diner, taking in the faded photographs on the walls, the regulars who clearly knew each other's names, the warmth that had nothing to do with the heating system. He was scrolling through his phone, responding to emails about his latest real estate acquisition, when the door chimed. A small boy entered, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. Jonathan watched as the child's face fell, seeing someone in his booth. But before Tommy could turn around and leave, Martha was already there. "Tommy, baby, come on. We'll set you up at the counter tonight. Got your favorite pot roast with extra gravy." Jonathan looked up sharply. There was something in the exchange that caught his attention, a tenderness, a familiarity. He watched as Tommy climbed onto a counter stool, his feet dangling well above the ground. He watched as Martha set down a plate piled high with food. He watched as the boy bowed his head, for just a moment before, eating with the focus of someone who understood the value of every bite. That boy a regular? Jonathan asked when Martha refilled his coffee. Martha's expression shifted, protective. He's family. Over the next hour, Jonathan observed. He saw how the other diners interacted with Tommy. Warm smiles, gentle teasing, the occasional high five. He saw how the boy helped clear dishes, how he said please and thank you with a sincerity that seemed rare. He saw how Martha's entire face softened every time she looked at him. Jonathan Price hadn't built a commercial real estate empire worth $300 million by being unobservant. He'd grown up in poverty himself, in a small town in West Virginia where dinner had often been a question mark. He recognized hunger, not just for food, but for stability, for kindness, for someone to believe in you. He saw his own childhood reflected in this boy's careful movements, in the way he made himself small, as if apologizing for taking up space in the world. When Tommy finished eating and pulled out a wrinkled homework sheet, struggling over a math problem, Jonathan made a decision. "Hey, kid," he called gently. "You need help with that?" Tommy looked up, surprised. Martha glanced over, protective but curious. What happened next unfolded over 2 hours. Jonathan discovered that Tommy wasn't just smart, he was brilliant. His mind worked through spatial concepts with an intuition that couldn't be taught. When Tommy mentioned his dream of becoming an architect, Jonathan felt something shift in his chest. He'd funded scholarships before, written checks to charities, attended galas where wealthy people congratulated each other for their generosity. But this was different. This was personal. "Martha," Jonathan said when Tommy excused himself to the restroom, "tell me about his situation." She did. She told him about the mother working herself to exhaustion, about the apartment with heat that barely worked, about the school supplies Tommy couldn't afford, about the boy's fierce pride that made him refuse anything that felt like charity. She told him about the future that was slipping, away from a child who deserved so much more. When Tommy returned, Jonathan was still there. "Tommy, my name is Jonathan Price. I own a commercial real estate development company. We design buildings, hospitals, schools, office complexes, and I have a proposition for you." The boy's eyes were wary. He'd learned that propositions from strangers rarely ended well. "I'd like to set up an education fund for you," Jonathan continued. "It would cover private school, tutoring, supplies, everything you need through high school. And if you keep your grades up, it'll cover college too. Architecture school, if that's what you want." Tommy froze. Martha's hand flew to her mouth. "Why?" Tommy whispered. It was the question of a child who'd learned that nothing came without a price. Jonathan leaned forward. "Because 25 years ago, I was you, and someone gave me a chance. A teacher who saw something in me, who helped me get a scholarship, who believed I could be more than my circumstances. I'm just paying it forward." What Jonathan didn't mention, what he would never mention, was that he'd already decided to do more. He'd contacted his attorney before his phone died, instructing him to create not just a scholarship for Tommy, but a foundation that would support Martha's Diner, ensuring that other hungry kids could find refuge there. He'd also arranged for Tommy's mother to receive job, training and placement assistance through one of his corporate partners. The tears came then, from Tommy, from Martha, from several eavesdropping regulars who'd gathered close enough to hear. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were the kind that come when you realize the world might be kinder than you thought, when you discover that your quiet suffering has been seen, when strangers become family. Tommy didn't just accept the scholarship. He thrived. Jonathan became a mentor, teaching him about architecture and business and perseverance. Martha remained his anchor, the place he returned to every week, no longer out of hunger but out of love. The diner became legendary in the neighborhood, not just as a place to eat, but as proof that kindness multiplies, that one person's compassion can change everything. 5 years later, when Tommy stood on stage at his private school graduation, having earned a full scholarship to MIT's architecture program, he insisted that 2 people sit in the front row, his mother and Martha Brennan. In the audience, Jonathan Price watched with quiet pride, thinking about the miracle of human connection, about how a dying Tesla battery had led him to the most important investment he'd ever make. The lesson was simple but profound. We all have the power to change someone's life. Sometimes it happens through grand gestures, but more often, it happens through small acts of consistent kindness, a warm meal, a listening ear, a belief in someone's potential. Martha had fed a hungry boy. A millionaire had provided opportunity. But what truly changed Tommy's life was something money couldn't buy: the knowledge that he mattered, that he was worth fighting for, that his dreams were valid. In the end, the story of Martha's Diner wasn't just about one boy being saved. It was about a community that chose to see, to care, to act. It was about the extraordinary power of ordinary people doing good. And it was a reminder that we're all connected, that the kindness we show today might be the seed that grows into someone else's tomorrow.